The next day unfolded in the way all days seemed to for Emily: routine, steady, predictable. She woke before the sun, made coffee in silence, and left for work with the weight of another long shift pressing on her shoulders. Yet, despite the hum of the office and the endless stack of papers, her thoughts kept circling back to the night before. She had told herself it was nothing, just exhaustion, just loneliness playing tricks on her. But the memory of Daniel's eyes lingered, vivid as if it had only happened a heartbeat ago. That look, so steady, so full of something unspoken, haunted her every quiet moment. By the time she returned home that evening, she was restless. The rain had cleared, leaving the streets slick with fading reflections of the sunset. She parked the car and sat there for a moment, hands gripping the wheel, gathering herself. It was just Daniel, she told herself again. Just her son. He was being kind, caring, protective. That was all. But her heart knew better when she finally stepped inside. The scent of something warm greeted her: garlic butter, a hint of herbs. She blinked, surprised. The kitchen light was on, and there he was, standing at the stove with a dish towel thrown over his shoulder. "Hey," Daniel said, glancing over at her with a smile that seemed to soften everything in the room. "You looked tired last night, so I thought I'd handle dinner today." Emily paused, her purse still hanging from her shoulder. "You cooked?" "Don't sound so shocked," he teased, turning back to stir the pan. "I've been watching you long enough. Figured I should try my hand at it." Her lips curved into a reluctant smile. "You're full of surprises lately." Daniel glanced at her then, and for just a second, there it was, again that look. The one that seemed to reach beneath her skin. The one that saw her not as his mother, but as a woman. Emily quickly looked away, slipping out of her coat, pretending not to notice. Dinner was simple pasta tossed in butter and herbs, a salad on the side. But sitting across the table from him, Emily felt anything but simple. Daniel had grown into himself in ways she hadn't realized until now. His voice carried a deeper timbre, his shoulders broader, his movements confident yet gentle. He wasn't the boy she remembered helping with homework. He was a man who looked at her like she mattered more than anything else in the room. They talked about ordinary things at first: work, bills, the little frustrations of the week. But somewhere between the dishes being cleared and the silence that followed, the air shifted again. Daniel leaned back against the counter, arms crossed, watching her with that same searching gaze. "Mom," he said quietly, "can I ask you something?" Emily's pulse quickened. "Of course." His jaw tightened, as though the words were heavy. "Do you ever feel like life cheated you?" The question caught her off guard. "Cheated me?" "Yeah." His eyes didn't waver. "Like you gave everything you had, and still, you ended up with less than you deserved." Emily's throat tightened. Memories of Mark rose uninvited: the nights he came home late, the excuses, the cold distance, and finally the silence of his leaving. She swallowed hard. "Sometimes," she admitted softly, "sometimes I do." Daniel's eyes softened, though his voice grew firmer. "You deserve more, Mom. You deserve someone who actually sees you. Someone who doesn't walk away." Her heart thudded painfully. She wanted to tell him not to speak like that she had made peace with her losses, that it didn't matter anymore. But when she opened her mouth, nothing came. Because the way he was looking at her, steady, certain, almost aching, felt like more than comfort. The silence stretched between them, thick with things unsaid. Emily's hands fidgeted with the dish towel, her body torn between stepping back and staying still. Then Daniel pushed off the counter and took a slow step closer. "Sometimes I think—" He hesitated, his words faltering as though he was standing on the edge of something dangerous. "Sometimes I think maybe we went through all of this for a reason. Maybe it's just us now because we're meant to be enough for each other." Emily froze, the towel slipping from her hands. Her breath hitched, her heart racing as though the room itself had tilted. "Daniel," she whispered, but her voice cracked on his name. He stopped only a foot away, his expression raw, vulnerable. For a second, it looked like he was going to say something more, something final, something that would change everything. His lips parted, his chest rising with unsteady breath. But then he looked at her eyes, really looked, and pulled back just enough to leave the words hanging in the air. Emily stood rooted, her hands trembling at her sides. She knew what he almost said. She felt it in her bones, in the way her own heart ached with both fear and longing. Neither of them spoke. The moment stretched, fragile and unfinished, leaving her with one truth. She couldn't deny whatever he had almost confessed. She wasn't ready to hear it. Not yet. But she also wasn't ready to forget it. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her body still, her mind restless. The shadows of the room shifted with the faint glow of the street lamp outside. But no matter how she turned, she couldn't escape the memory of Daniel standing in the kitchen. So close, his voice so raw, his almost confession still echoing in her chest. She pressed a hand against her heart as though she could steady it. What was happening to her? To them. It was supposed to be simple. He was her son, her boy, the one she had raised and protected. But lately, every time he looked at her, she didn't see a boy. She saw a man, and that terrified her. By morning, she convinced herself it had been nothing more than a moment that got out of hand to lonely people, caring too much, reaching for comfort in the wrong way. She promised herself she'd keep her distance, draw the line, remind him of who they were. But promises have a way of breaking when the heart is involved. When Emily came home that evening, Daniel was in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a book in hand. He looked up as soon as she entered, and there it was, again, that steady gaze that pinned her in place, that made her feel both fragile and seen. "Long day?" he asked gently. She nodded, slipping off her shoes. "They always are." Daniel closed the book, setting it aside. "Then sit. Rest. Let me take care of you tonight." Something in the way he said it made her hesitate. She wanted to protest, to remind him he didn't need to take on her burdens, but the truth was she longed for it. Longed for someone to take care of her, even if only for a night. She sat beside him, the cushion dipping under her weight. The silence that followed wasn't heavy this time. It was charged, warm, humming with an energy she didn't dare name. Daniel turned slightly, his body facing hers. "Mom," he said softly, his voice low enough to sound almost secret. Her heart stumbled. Yes. He hesitated, his jaw tightening like he was searching for the right words. Instead of speaking, he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers. It was a small touch, innocent enough. But the spark that shot through her body left her breathless. Emily should have pulled away. She knew that. But instead, she let his hand linger. And then, slowly, she let her fingers curl into his. The world seemed to narrow, the air between them thick with everything unsaid. She forced herself to speak, to break the moment before it swallowed her whole. "Daniel, this is dangerous." His grip tightened just slightly. Dangerous. His voice was calm, steady, but his eyes betrayed him. They were filled with emotion, with something deeper than she was ready to face. "Yes," she whispered, her throat tight. "People wouldn't understand." "I don't even understand." Daniel leaned in closer. Not enough to touch, but enough that she felt his warmth. "I don't care what people would say. I only care about you." "About us." Her breath caught. Tears stung her eyes. Not from sadness, but from the weight of everything she had carried alone. Everything she had longed for, but denied herself. "You don't know what you're saying," she murmured. But even to her own ears, it sounded weak. He shook his head. "I know exactly what I'm saying. You've given me everything, your time, your love, your sacrifices. You've been strong for so long. Let me be strong for you now." Her chest ached with longing, with fear, with the dizzying pull of something she couldn't control. "You're my son," she said finally, her voice breaking. Daniel's eyes didn't waver. "And you're my everything." The words hit her like a wave, leaving her breathless. Her hand trembled in his, but she didn't pull away. She couldn't, because deep inside, beneath the fear and the rules and the lines she had drawn, her heart whispered what she couldn't say aloud, that she didn't want to let go. The silence stretched. fragile and unsteady until Daniel moved again. He lifted her hand slowly, deliberately, bringing it close as if it were something sacred. His lips brushed against her knuckles in the faintest of touches. Emily closed her eyes, a tear slipping free. It was too much, too tender, too dangerous. When she opened her eyes, Daniel was still watching her, his expression filled with both hope and restraint. He hadn't crossed the line, not fully, but he was standing at the edge, waiting. And she realized something in that moment. Life would never be the same again. That hug, that look, his words, his touch. They had already changed everything. It was supposed to be simple. Just a hug. Just comfort. Just mother and son. But as Emily sat there, her hand still in his, her heart trembling with unspoken feelings, she understood the truth. Nothing about them was just anymore. And tomorrow would demand a choice. The rain had been falling all day, thin silver streaks against the windows. Soft enough to lull, but steady enough to remind Emily of how heavy the world felt lately. The sound followed her home, like an echo of her thoughts, constant, unrelenting. She pushed the front door open with tired hands, her shoulder brushing against the worn wood frame, and stepped into the quiet house. For a moment, she just stood there, her coat damp, her shoes carrying in the faint smell of wet earth. She closed her eyes and let out a sigh. Another day behind her, another set of responsibilities waiting tomorrow. It seemed endless, this routine of hers work, bills, chores, and the hollow silence that crept in after dark. But it wasn't always silence. Somewhere in that house, Daniel was home, her son, her boy, no, her young man now, 22. And somehow, in those 2 years since Mark had left, Daniel had grown into someone she almost didn't recognize. Taller, stronger, with a quiet steadiness she leaned on more than she ever admitted. "Mom?" His voice carried from the living room, warm, low. Familiar. Emily dropped her purse on the little table by the door and forced a smile, even though he couldn't see her yet. "Yeah, it's me," she called, her voice tired but soft. He appeared in the doorway, his hair slightly messy, wearing an old gray t-shirt and sweatpants. Simple, ordinary. But the way he looked at her, it made something in her chest loosen. His gaze wasn't distracted or careless like it used to be when he was a teenager. No, his eyes followed her now with attention. As though he noticed the weight she carried, the lines on her face, the exhaustion in her shoulders. "You're soaked," he said, stepping closer. "Rough day." Emily nodded, too tired to explain. "Just long. It feels like the rain followed me everywhere today." Daniel gave her that half smile she knew so well. "Then it's a good thing you're home now." Before she could reply, he closed the distance between them and wrapped his arms around her. At first, she froze. It had been so long since someone had held her like that. Not a polite hug, not a quick touch, but a real embrace. Warm, steady, meant to stay. She let herself lean into it, her cheek pressing lightly against his chest. The steady rhythm of his heartbeat filled her ears, grounding her in a way she hadn't felt in years. She didn't have to hold herself together in that moment. She didn't have to be the strong one. Her arms, almost on their own, circled his waist. She closed her eyes. The hug was supposed to be brief, but seconds stretched, lingered. Time slowed, and for the first time in so long, she felt safe. It startled her. The warmth in his hold seeped through her guard, through the careful wall she'd built since Mark walked out. She had told herself she didn't need anyone, that she was fine being alone, that love had hurt her enough already. Yet here she was, holding her son, feeling something she couldn't name, something that left her unsteady. She should have let go. She knew she should have. But instead, she held on just a little longer. When she finally pulled back, Emily expected Daniel to step away, to move on, to treat it like nothing more than comfort for his tired mother. But he didn't. His hands lingered at her arms, steadying her, keeping her close. That was when she noticed the look in his eyes. It wasn't careless. It wasn't casual. It wasn't what she expected from him. His eyes searched hers, deep, steady, filled with something unspoken. a tenderness that made her breath catch, a quiet intensity that left her unsure if she should look away or keep staring. Emily's lips parted, but no words came. She couldn't name it, couldn't explain it. And suddenly, the silence of the house wasn't heavy anymore. It was charged, humming with something neither of them had meant to awaken. She blinked, her heart stumbling in her chest. She told herself it was nothing. Just a hug. Just her son trying to comfort her. But then, why did it feel like so much more? Emily had always prided herself on being able to read people. Years of managing a household, working long hours, and surviving heartbreak had sharpened her instincts. She could tell when someone was lying, when they were hiding something, when they were about to say words they didn't mean. But that night, standing in the living room under the dim, golden light of the lamp, she found herself completely disarmed. Because the look in Daniel's eyes wasn't one she knew how to read. She had seen him as a boy bright-eyed, hazy-haired, chasing soccer balls across the yard. She had seen him as a teenager moody, withdrawn, full of questions about life and himself. And she had seen him as a young man, serious, hardworking, stepping up to help her in ways his father never had. But this was different. The hug had ended. But Daniel's gaze hadn't softened. It stayed steady and searching, as though he could see every wall she'd built inside herself. Emily shifted slightly, tucking a strand of damp hair behind her ear, breaking eye contact for a second. "Thank you, sweetheart," she said, her voice meant to sound light. But it trembled. She felt it, and she knew he heard it. Daniel didn't step back. He didn't laugh it off or change the subject the way most young men his age might have. Instead, his voice lowered, warm and quiet, carrying more weight than his years should have allowed. "You don't have to carry it all alone, Mom." Her breath caught. She looked at him, really looked. There was no trace of the boy who once needed her for everything. There was only a man, her son, yes, but also someone who had grown through pain alongside her. Someone who had lost too. Someone who, in some unspoken way, seemed to understand her loneliness. Emily forced a small smile, though it felt fragile on her lips. "That's just life, Daniel. You learn to carry it." He tilted his head, studying her like he wasn't convinced. "Or maybe you just get used to the weight because no one else has offered to help." His words sank into her. Sharp yet gentle, unsettling yet comforting. She didn't know how to answer. For so long she had played the role of caretaker, the one who steadied everything after Mark walked out. But here was Daniel, standing taller than her now, offering something she hadn't dared hope for: someone to see her, to hold her, to share the burden. Her throat tightened. "You're too young to worry about me," she whispered. Daniel's smile was soft, almost sad. "Too young. Mom, I've watched you fall asleep at the kitchen table paying bills. I've watched you break down when you thought I wasn't listening. I'm not a kid anymore. Maybe I'm the one who should be looking after you now." The air between them grew still. Emily's heart raced. Not just from his words, but from the way he looked at her as he said them, steady, protective, almost possessive. It was the kind of look she had once longed for from her husband, the kind she hadn't felt in years. Her instincts told her to step back, to laugh it off, to remind him that he was her son. But her heart, her aching, lonely heart, kept her rooted in place. She cleared her throat, desperate to redirect. "You've grown up too fast," she murmured, more to herself than to him. Daniel's hand twitched at his side, like he wanted to reach for her but wasn't sure if he should. His voice was quiet, almost hesitant. But it carried a truth she couldn't ignore. "Maybe I had to, Mom. Maybe life wanted me to grow up so I could be here. For you." Emily's chest tightened, her pulse drumming in her ears. She wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this wasn't his responsibility. But when she opened her mouth, no words came. Because deep down, she knew part of her didn't want to push him away. The silence stretched, heavy and charged. Emily turned toward the window, pretending to watch the rain, but really, she was hiding the emotions in her eyes. Her reflection in the glass looked older than she remembered, lines of worry etched across her face, shadows of sleepless nights under her eyes. And behind her reflection, Daniel stood, tall and steady, his gaze never leaving her. For a fleeting second, she imagined what it would feel like to lean into him again. Not as a mother seeking comfort, but as a woman who hadn't been touched, truly touched, in years. The thought startled her, and she shook it away as quickly as it came. Still, when she finally turned back to him, she knew nothing would ever feel the same again. Because that look in his eyes, the one she couldn't name, couldn't explain, had already planted something dangerous inside her, something she wasn't sure she had the strength to resist.